Right, well, thank you, Richard, for that introduction, and you've saved me the trouble of explaining where the toilets and the fire escape are out there through Pulse and everything. Righto, so, well, this evening it's my very, very great pleasure to introduce the most excellent emeritus professor of psychology from York University, here to perform the art of the medieval minstrel, playing the wheel fiddle, Hurdy Gurdy, recorders, hammered dulcimer, lute and voice, and gittern. Well, I've heard most of these things, but it was a long time ago when I used to listen to Philip Pickett and the New London Consort on Radio 3, if some of you remember that. But today we have the marvellous Peter Bull.
Excuse me, sir. I'm going to wear my instruments. We're playing a variety of replica medieval instruments, and this one I'm about to strap myself into, the straps that might be around would help, is typically known as a hurdy-gurdy, but I prefer the term wheel fiddle because it describes it more accurately. I don't like the word hurdy-gurdy. It's sort of rather belittles it. But to play the instrument, first of all, you have to strap yourself into it quite tightly, actually, because the idea is to use your hands to play it, not stop it jigging around, which is what would happen otherwise.
Do you need assistance, Peter?
There are two straps.
Oh, do you need a bit of a hand, or you're all right?
No, it's all right. I've done it before.
That's lucky.
But thank you. Okay. Right. I'll play something for you, then I'll talk a little. No. Shall I talk a little about it first? I'm just talking to time. No, I'll explain it a little first. So it's called a wheel fiddle, because this is the wheel cover. Under here there is a wheel, and as you turn the handle, it turns the wheel. Imagine the wheel is like the bow of a fiddle, but it's being bowed all the time by a wheel. That's actually what's producing the sound. I've got 3 strings on, as we say. They are touching the wheel, so they're vibrating as I turn the handle. 2 of those strings are melody strings, and the 3rd string is the drone. The melody strings work by touching. Those keys are stretching the strings. Like putting your fingers down on a violin or guitar. Change the sounding length of the string, enables you to play a tune. The 3rd string is a drone string, which just produces one continuous note, which is why people often say that it sounds like the bagpipes, because the bagpipes have a chanter and they have drones, so the harmonically it's the same as the bagpipes. I can just turn the hand like this. Or a little flick of the wrist, I can make it do both. That's the rhythm section. This is the medieval rhythm section. And the idea is that you play the tune with the left hand and you beat out the rhythm with the right hand, but you have to coordinate the 2 things at the same time. So it's rather like patting your head and rubbing your tummy. I can't actually talk about it when I'm playing because I'm already doing 2 things at once, and if I try to speak, then it all falls apart. I'm doing 3 things at once. And before anyone makes the obvious point, let me say it right at the outset, I have never seen a lady play the hurdy-gurdy and talk about it at the same time. And I think you know what I'm referring to. So these are a couple of pieces I've learned hurdy-gurdy from the late 15th century. can't play these for too long, your arm gets tired. For a complete change of sound, another very characteristic medieval instrument, that is the recorder. The recorder goes right back to the Middle Ages, so does the name, in fact, actually. It's a very distinctly English name, recorder. They don't call them that on the continent. In Germany they call them Blockflöte, in Italy they call them Flappadolci. It's a very distinctly English name. I'm not quite sure why, but we find the earliest reference to in the late 14th century. There was a document belonging to that time, the Duke of Derby, who later became King Henry IV, and it refers specifically to an instrument that's been purchased for him by the name of a recorder, so we know they're around. This particular one to play is a copy from a musical treatise penned by a man called Sebastian Vierdum. Rather later, it was in the 16th century, early 16th century, called Musica Getuscht, and it is actually the very, very first treatise on musical instruments ever published. There's lots of pictures of different instruments, including pictures of recorders. And so this particular instrument has been lovingly recreated from those illustrations by a maker called Dudley Hanson, no longer with us, but a very fine maker of recorders in his day. It has two very distinctive features which differ from, anyone knows about modern recorders, it's different in two ways. One is it's a solid piece of wood. The modern recorder is typically made of three pieces, and they have joints and you put it all together. That's not the case here. It is one piece of wood. And the other thing about it is that it has a rather wider bore than the modern recorder. The bore is quite important because the narrower bore you can get more high notes. With a wider bore you can't. But what you get instead, I think rather pleasingly, is a much woodier kind of sound. And this one I think sounds almost sort of rather flute-like when you play it. I rather like the sound that comes out of it. So I want to play. This is a group of English medieval songs from the 14th century, but I don't want to sing them. I actually want to play the melodies on the recorder. The instrument to switch to next is one on the table here. It's called a hammered dulcimer. I'll hold it up actually so you see my face. It's not actually that heavy. So I'll hold it up so you can see. This instrument has been copied from a 15th century painting by an Italian artist. And the very useful features of this painting, which are very useful in reconstructing the actual instrument. I'm just going to start my notes to remind myself. Yes, it's by Giovanni Boccati. It's called The Virgin Child, dates from the 15th century. You may be able to see down here, there are pegs. And to each peg there is a string attached. Okay, and there are 18 of those. And you can see that detail on that painting from 500 years ago. And that's a jolly useful piece of information. You're trying to reconstruct an instrument from 500 years ago. You can see there are 18 strings. Another feature of the instrument is that, see, don't drop it. This down here is called the bridge. And depending on which side of the bridge you hit the strings, you get a note a fifth apart. So this is a development of the 15th century. You're looking at a major technological breakthrough in dulcimer making in the 15th century when they started introducing the bridge, because it doubled the amount of notes you could get. So for every pair of strings you get 2 notes. And the strings, I should say, should be in unison. So it gives it a little bit more volume. And you play the instrument with a couple of little sticks, which are more properly called hammers, and these little sticks here. And they're made out of wood, but the tips are covered with leather, which makes a kind of softer kind of sound. I've heard them play without the leather colouring. It's a bit harsh. It gives a softer, sweeter kind of sound. And that is, of course, the origin of the name dulcimer. Comes from a Latin word dulcis, meaning sweet, as in dulcet tones. And that is where the name comes from. The German name for it is a hackbrett, which means a butcher's board. So whether they play dulcimers very differently from the way we play them, I don't know. But think about it. So anyway, I want to do 3 pieces. One is a carol, and the other 2 are dances. The carol comes from, it's called Person Hurdy, which you probably know, and it comes from a book which was published in Scandinavia, which are a lot of medieval carols, and it was brought back. The book was given as a present to the Victorian ambassador in Sweden, who brought it back to England, and a lot of the tunes there became very popular carols that we know to this day. Things like Good King Wenceslas is a popular medieval tune, it's just that no one actually knows that. That's where it comes from. So anyway, that's the carol, and there are 2 dances. One called a ballad, and another one a bass dance, which is a very slow dance. And it's a dance from Cleves, but I have to hasten to add this. That this has nothing to do with the lady who became the 4th wife of Henry VIII. That was 100 years later. She hasn't happened yet, so it's nothing to do with it at all. So 3 pieces on dulcimer. moving again, I want to get to this instrument here, which is a medieval lute. The lute again is a medieval instrument. This particular one has been copied from a late 15th century illustration. The ribbed effect on the verse, which I find rather pretty, is created by using different woods. I think it's ebony and pear. And the striped effect, the chevron effect here, is the black is ebony. The white is bone. This has been inlaid with pieces of bone to create this this checkered effect here. And you may be able to see, I hope you can at this distance, carved into the instrument are two roses. And this was a custom of the time, and people thought if you carve roses into your instrument, you will play or sing in a sweet and lovely fashion. It's true. The instrument is a plectrum instrument. It was only in the 16th century they started plucking with their fingers. In medieval times, they would actually most likely use a quill, which is what I'm holding here. And this quill used to belong to a swan, I believe, but I hasten to add it was a French swan. It's not been stolen from an English swan. It's important. One of the interesting things about the lute is that it's what psychologists call a size-weight illusion. That is to say, it's a great big object. So you think it's going to be very heavy, but it isn't. It's actually incredibly light. Indeed, if you hand the lute to someone, you have to warn them first of all that it's very light, because otherwise they chuck it up in the air. So, does anyone feel brave enough to want to actually hold a lute, a genuine replica of a medieval lute? Don't chuck it up. It's very, very light.
Oh, really? Okay. Oh, it is, isn't it?
Weighs nothing at all.
Gosh, have a little go. It's like a harmonica. It's really light, isn't it?
Anyone else?
Where did you get that made?
It's made by Lute in London.
Okay. I had a neighbour in Hare Hills, that's about 25 years ago now. Used to make instruments for an instrument place on Manningham Lane in Bradford.
Oh yeah.
And he get woods from all over the world.
Yes. Do you remember his name?
Can't remember now. I haven't seen him for 25 years. I can't remember. We used to have like a workshop in the attic. He used to make. You'd hear him like quite late at night. And I went round one day. I said, "What were you doing last night?" He goes, "Oh, come up and I'll show you." And there's all these workbenches.
Oh, making a lute. What else could I be doing?
He didn't make much loot out of it.
I've never heard that one before. But yeah, there was an early music shop in Bradford, which has now moved to Saltaire, and in fact is the biggest and most important shop of early music instruments in the country. It's very, very, very famous. Oh yes, one other thing which people always ask, mention, this is called the peg box. Okay, so why is it bent back at 90 degrees? It's always bent back at 90 degrees on lutes. And the explanation I like best is this is a very smart piece of medieval technology, because if you straighten that bit out, you've got the neck of the instrument is that much longer, and that puts more pressure on the neck, and it's more likely to warp. So by bending it back, you reduce the amount of pressure on the actual neck of the instrument. And in fact, on some guitars, when they actually put steel rods in to strengthen the neck for precisely that problem, to prevent it happening. It doesn't happen here because, as I say, they've bent it back. All lutes always have this particular feature. So I better do something. And waffled on a bit. Thank you very much. What I want to do is do 3 songs, which I want to. Before I play the songs, I'm going to take a much needed sip of water. So, 3 songs, 1 religious, 1 secular, and 1 is a riddle song. They were very fond of riddles in the Middle Ages, and this is a particular riddle that comes from those times. The first song is the religious one is a plain song, a chant to the Virgin Mary. The second one is a love song, basically, and it's written by a very famous French composer called Guillaume de Machaut. And Guillaume, as I'm sure you know, is French for William, and Machaut was the place that he came from. So a very loose translation of his name might be something like Bill from Manchester. I'm not against Manchester at all, it's a great city, but I think it loses something in the translation. So, a religious song, a love song, and a river song. Ave Maris, a star upon the sea, Dei Mater Alma, blessed may she be, Semper atque Pildo, pray thy son for me, Felix Cele Porta, that may come to thee, Gabriel, that archangel, his messenger, they greet our Lady with a face so clear, Hail be thou Mary, be thou Mary, full of God's own grace and Queen of mercy. Ave Maris, Stella, star upon the sea, Dei Mater Alma, blessed may she be, how that shall thee greet without deadly sin, 40 days of pardon God will grant it thee. Ave Maris, Stella, star upon the sea, Dei Mater Alma, blessed may she be. Quand je suis mise au retour, de voir madame, et une peine me douleur, que j'ai pas m'âme, Dieu, c'est toi, et je l'aime sans blâme, la loi et l'amour. When I return it from seeing my lady, I feel no pain or suffering on my soul. God, it is only right that I love her without blame, with true love. Her beauty, her grace, sweetness of amorous flame, to remember night and day, seizes and inflames me. God, it is only right that I love her without blame, with true love. And when her great value moves my noble heart, I want to serve her, no foolish thought defame. God, it is only right that I love her without blame, with true love. God, it is only right that I love her without blame, with true love. I had 4 brothers over the sea, very merry dictum domine, they sent a present for me, very merry dictum domine, partum quartum, very merry dictum domine. The first sent a chicken without any bone, very merry dictum domine. The second sent a cherry without any stone, very merry dictum domine. The third sent a book that no one can read, very merry dictum domine. The fourth sent a blanket without any thread, very merry dictum domine. Partum quartum, very merry dictum domine. How can there be a chicken without any bone? Very merry dictum domine. How can there be a cherry without any stone? Very merry dictum domine. How can there be a book that no one can read? Very merry dictum domine. How can there be a blanket without any thread? Very merry dictum domine. Partum quartum, very merry dictum domine. When the cherries in the blossom, it has no stone, very merry dictum domine. When the chicken's in the egg, it has no bone, very merry dictum domine. When the book's in the press, no man can it read, very merry dictum domine. When the blanket's in the fleece, it has no thread, very merry dictum domine. Partum quartum, very merry dictum domine. Partum quartum, very merry dictum domine. Thank you so so much. I should have mentioned at the start that a lot of these songs are written both in English and Latin, I could notice. And they actually called it macaronic Latin, since macaroni is a vegetable mixture, there's a mixture, and this is a linguistic mixture. The last I should also mention, perimeridictum, in case you're wondering what it means, it doesn't mean anything, it's just a piece of completely nonsense. It's basically the medieval equivalent of do-a-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee. Don't mean anything. So, I want to do one more sequence on the recorder. These are two pieces, one Spanish, from a collection called the Cantigas de Santa Maria. These are a great 13th century collection of Spanish music, in which they set songs, popular songs. But the words were religious, typically praise the Virgin Mary. And the second piece is actually a German piece. It's the only German piece I have in the programme, and it was penned by a knight, a German knight, who has the rather splendid name of Walter von der Vogelweide. and Vogelweide actually means bird field. What it means is that poor old Sir Walter hadn't got a castle and anywhere to live. He had to sleep out in the fields, which is very sad. He became a very famous poet and a famous songwriter. And Unter den Linden, which is a song, probably one of the German songs that most people know, is actually penned by Walter von der Vogelweide. And this particular piece that I want to play is called Palästinalied. It's a song of Palestine. So two more pieces on the recorder. To finish up with, I'd like to do another sequence on Hurdy. These are some English dances from the 15th century, which were recently discovered in manuscript about 30 years ago. So they were added to our knowledge of English dance music. And before I do that, I just would like to thank you for your attention, for coming to this event. If you're interested in anything more about the instruments and want to ask any questions about them, you're very welcome to do so after I finish this final piece. There's a lot more information available about them, on what I have to admit is a complete total and utter anachronism. That is to say, I have a website. Well, it's a Mediaeval technology. And it's peterballs.com, and there's a lot of information about all the different instruments that I actually play. And finally, if you want to hear more of this music, I do, as it happens, have a CD with me, which virtually all the music I play tonight is actually can be heard on this particular CD available for you to finish up with.